Young man, take a look at me now.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Tour Talk. Our guest tonight is the co-host of Sweetwater Fishing TV. He's a guide on the Coosa River Lakes. He's fished the Bass Open Circuit since 2010. Like so many pros out there today, he's got his own YouTube channel, Joy Nania, and he produces lots and lots of content. He's also the champion of the first stop of the BASS Central Open Series at Lake Pickwick. Joy, welcome to Tour Talk. Thanks for being with us tonight.
Hey, Keith, I'm excited to be on here. Thanks for having me, man. I really appreciate it.
This was actually supposed to be the second stop of the Central Open. The first stop, well, you guys have got some unbelievable weather this year.
Yeah, it has been weird. I mean, Alabama's just been so up and down. I mean, it's been, March had some warm spells and then a lot of rain. And then April's been kind of up and down and kind of chilly still. And then you got all these big floods coming. And I mean, even right now with the elite anglers up at Neely Henry this week, it's been just crazy weather, weird, really, really weird stuff. And Pickwick was no different, getting flooded out big time when the elites were there earlier in the year, and then kind of being more stable. And the weirdest thing about when we were there is that there was no current. So for the Bassmaster Open that I won there, I mean, there was very, very little flow. There was a little bit of current, but nothing for Pickwick standards. And so, I was actually like, if I would have looked back on the schedule last year, the tournament that I would have looked for to have a shot at winning would have been Smith Lake. And of course they canceled that one, which was obviously just very meant to be that, it worked out perfect. But, that was the one I was looking forward to because I've had some really good tournaments at Smith and I've never fished a professional event at Pickwick, but it just all obviously came together perfectly for me. So I was definitely grateful for that.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And speaking of that, congratulations on a great win at Lake Pickwick. Congratulations on an automatic classic berth for 2022.
Yeah.
And congratulations for moving into the top 20 of the Bass 2 Anglers podcast. Now, I don't know if you're familiar with this or not, but we do a thing on our channel where we are keeping track of all the events this year, opens, opens and Toyota Series and elites and Bass Tours. And I mean, we've got like 63 events that we're watching and keeping track of. And to be in the top 20 of that's a pretty big deal.
That's awesome, man. I really appreciate that for real. And, the biggest key for me has been my mindset over the last year or so. And, it really actually sprouted from my wife, Jessica. I mean, she's just an amazing, it's kind of weird, the man in a lot of ways is supposed to be the head of the household, but my wife is just amazing. And she's been such a rock for me and my family. And, when I was straying away from what my priority should have been, which was growing spiritually, she's been the one that's been so strong for me. And so my wife's been a huge help to me, it's one of those things where if it wasn't for her, then I would be nowhere. So we're a great team, and it's really cool with what I do with the Opens. My wife and I get to travel together everywhere, and we travel with our two boys, Zeke and Eli.
It is certainly important to have a strong team, and any wife that puts up with what fishermen do is in line for sainthood.
Yeah,
that's just the way it goes. I mean, that's just the way it is. They are in line for sainthood, and well, congratulations on putting it all together and having a good team there for you.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
You have roots in the West. I
do.
When I saw the Open last week, and I was looking at that name and going, I know Nania from somewhere. You started in Washington State or somewhere out here in the West, right?
Yeah, I did. I grew up in Liberty Lake, Washington, which is near Spokane. And the Inland Empire Bass Club is where I got my start in tournament fishing. And, it's cool. I grew up on a little small lake and loved to fish my whole life. And I've been actually obsessed with it my whole life. Since I was born. My whole family fishes, from my grandparents to my dad to my uncles to my cousins. I mean, that's what we do is we fish. And it's kind of funny, they all work, and I just happen to be able to, I just latched onto it on another level, and I wanted to do it for a living, since I was 10 or 11 years old. That's what I've wanted to do. And so my dad actually started the first youth program in Washington State through the Bassmaster through Bass, BASS. And I started that with the Inland Empire Bass Club. And I've been able to, I grew through that club and really had a lot of great older guys that were in the club mentor me and just teach me and raise me up through the club. And my dad's always been so supportive to get me everywhere I needed to be to have the most opportunities to succeed. And it just started there. And once he started that youth chapter, I ended up winning the, a Washington State junior championship, and then ended up going to the world championship and got partnered up with Kevin Van Dam randomly, which is just insane that happened at age 14. And I ended up winning the junior world championship in Pittsburgh the same year he won the Bassmaster Classic in Pittsburgh. And it's just, I mean, it's all just kind of flowed from there to, having a career in bass fishing. So it's been pretty special. But I do love fishing in Washington. I look at these lakes now that I have to break down in the South that are, a 50,000 acre lake, just a monster of a lake. And I look back at some of the lakes I used to fish when I was a kid in Washington, and I'm like, man, if I could go back to those same lakes in Washington that are, 1/50th of the size, just imagine the damage I could do on those poor fish. But, it's kind of funny, kind of translating what I've learned here and thinking about growing up in Washington. I mean, there's no shad in Washington. They eat perch and bluegill there. So there's been a lot of learning curves. And the biggest, the most important thing for me was moving to the South when I was 19 and just learning these Southern lakes and getting really fully involved in fishing in the South. And that's where so many great Bassmaster anglers come from, and all across the South. But Alabama is just a great state to live. But I definitely have deep roots in Washington.
What either caused or allowed you to move to Alabama at such a young age?
So I was 18 and I was working at the Bassmaster Classic, and I was working for my sponsors there. I had won 2 junior world championships at that point, and I was working with Bass Pro Shops and Nitro. And there was a evangelist there named Rick Hughes, who's from Pell City, where I live now. And he actually invited me and my dad to stay a few days after the Classic and fish with him. And we just became friends from working at the Classic for 3 days. And so I ended up staying. And then I went back home to Washington, and my dad, without me knowing it, actually called Rick and asked him to invite me down without me knowing it, because he knew I needed some good influence and some positive things going on, because I was an 18, 19-year-old just getting out of high school. And it was, my dad knew that I needed to, be a little restabilized. So it's just part of my past. And so Rick called me and invited me down, and I came down in that summer and spent some time with him, and actually became a Christian then, and decided that next fall to move down to the South in the spring. So that was the decision. And then also, I mean, so if you want to fish for a living, you can't live in Washington in so many ways. I mean, you can, but it's very, very difficult. That's just a really hard road. So living in the South puts you so much closer to, the majority of our tournaments, and you're not driving 40 hours to Louisiana, you're driving 8 hours to Louisiana, So it was just a really, really good family decision. And I'm very, very close with my mom and dad and my grandparents that still live in Washington, and my sister and my brother-in-law. But it was just one of those things where we all knew that it was the best for me to move to the South. So it was definitely a good decision. It didn't take long. When I moved to the South, I met my wife after about 4 months, and then we got married a year later. And 2 months later, Zeke was on the way, my first son, my 8-year-old. And it's just all been history from there. And so now I get to fish for a living. So.
Koppel Outfitters wants you to go have an adventure now. Koppel Outfitters specializes in adventure gear. Anything you need for getting outside, Koppel Outfitters has it and more. Go have an adventure now. If you look at your background and you look at your resume, you've been fishing for, professionally almost half your life. And so when you look at this resume, you're going, well, this guy's got to be, late 30s, almost 40. You just turned 30, right?
Yeah, I'm getting old, man. I can't believe I turned 30. I have one gray hair on this sideburn right
here. That's okay. That's okay. Some of us have a lot more. But the point is, your resume says old man, but you're not.
Yeah. No, I'm not. That's for sure. And it's kind of funny. There's a learning curve in fishing. And it's one of those things where if you can hit your stride where you're still very athletically capable and you're physically capable and you don't get tired, you don't get worn down. And I was blessed with being coordinated with good hand-eye coordination at a young age. And that's just kind of how I've grown up coordinated. I can throw a football really good and catch a football, and I can make all the casts you have to make as a pro angler. But when you finally get a schedule that comes out for the Bassmaster Opens and you look at the schedule and there's not a single lake on the central or southern schedule that I haven't fished before, it's like, oh my gosh, I finally get to go to all these places and I actually have past experience on them. So it's actually this is the first year that either the centrals or the southerns, neither one of those had a lake I haven't been on yet. So I was excited about the schedule when it came out, and I've always loved Pickwick Lake.
Well, let's go ahead and talk about Pickwick. It seems like in winning that tournament. First of all, before we talk about Pickwick, I just want to make sure that we say this at some point. I don't think there is a tougher circuit out there than to try and than the opens. The opens,
Yeah.
I have so much respect for the opening, and I always have, even when it was pro on pro. It is
Mhm.
just brutal. And I think the Toyota series probably is in that same category. But when you got to go up
Yeah.
against 200 plus anglers and at least 2 dozen like local sticks that are going to be fishing that because it's a money tournament for them,
Yep.
you come out of that, that's impressive.
Yeah, man. The opens are tough. And I actually, I've had moments in my opens career where like I've known in my heart that I'm a great fisherman. I've always been good at catching fish and I'm very versatile. I've learned so many different ways to catch them, but making that all work in a tournament sense in any given week on a lake that you don't have a ton of experience on is very difficult. So I've been to that point where it's like, man, I just finished 50th in an open or 60th or 70th. And for the last 4 years, or I guess really like 3.5 years, I haven't had a finish worse than in the 70s out of 180 to 225 boats in most of those tournaments. So that's not bad. But when you have like 5 in a row where you finished between 45 and 65th, and you're like, I just beat 130 people or 100 to 150, 160 people in all these, but I didn't get a paycheck. And so it starts like you're like, man, why am I not quite climbing, why am I not breaking through and getting checks in all these tournaments? And why are these elite guys coming in? And every single one of these opens, there's 30 elite guys. And why are they always in the top? And, then you got your locals that are in the top. And really for me, it was a mindset and, just having confidence and not worrying about, I don't really, it doesn't bother me if I have a bad tournament now in a lot of ways. Like I know that I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. And I know that my family is what's important to me. And I know that I'm fishing for a living. So I'm so grateful for it. But, to finally get a win at Pickwick, the crazy thing about that whole entire Bassmaster Open at Pickwick is that I didn't even I had no expectations of winning. And all the way up till I idled in and saw some random boat pumping his fist at me and yelling at me and cheering for me, I didn't think I had won that tournament. So I was literally, my goal was to have fun and to, be the best person I could be and just have a blast and just, go fishing and do what I love. And next thing I know, I won the Bassmaster Open at Pickwick. So,
Well, okay. So there's 3 days and you literally had to adjust and fish differently each day, correct?
yep.
Talk about how you did that
Yeah.
and
So
why.
day one, I didn't know what I was going to do in the last like 5 or 6 tournaments in my career. People will be like, oh, what are you going to do tomorrow? And I'm like, well, I got all these different ideas in my head, but I really don't know yet. Like, I'm not going to set a for sure game plan. And I used to set like, okay, I'm going to fish here till 11, then I'm going to go here till 1, and then I'm going to run here for the last 2 hours of the day or whatever. And I can't do that anymore. So they'd be like, oh, are you on them? And I'm like, well, I had a decent practice. I got bites here and I got this pattern going and this pattern going, but I really don't know where I'm going to go and how it's going to, full unfold. But at Pickwick, there was no difference in that. I was very relaxed. I was very free. And I had a grass deal going where I was fishing a chatterbait in 8 to 12 foot hydrilla and milfoil mix. And then my buddy Wesley Gore had actually got on a stump deal where the stumps were mixing with the grass and there was isolated stumps on top of these bars. And he had kind of got keyed in on that when we were breaking down a flat together. He ran into it and saw it, and we were staying together and we talked, we shared information, and that really helped out in the final day. But as far as the first day goes, I rolled up, I was heading to my grass area, and there's this one gravel point in Bear Creek that I fished with a good buddy of mine named Red Berry like 5 years ago in a tournament. And I've always caught fish on that gravel point. So I practiced it one day. I went in there looking for a shad spawn and I threw a swim bait out there and caught like a 465 smallmouth in practice. So I said, all right, I was running up the lake and I was boat 5. And so you got all these opportunities in your head. It's like, okay, should I get to the grass first before all these other guys get up to the Kroger Island area? Or do I swing in here and fish? And the wind was ripping through Bear Creek. I pulled up right on that point and made like 3 casts and caught a 3.5 pounder. And I'm like, all right, I boat flipped it. And it was way bigger than I thought it was. I boat flipped it in the boat on like 14-pound vicious. And I was like, all right, that's great. And I fire out there 2 more casts and catch it almost 3-pounder. And so right then I was relaxed. I was like, okay, we're good. And I caught 2 or 3 more fish, never got another keeper, and ended up heading up to my grass. And when I got there to the grass area, there was like probably 10 boats in the area I was wanting to fish, maybe 5 or 6 in my little stretch, but there was boats everywhere. And I knew that was going to happen. So I just found a spot where I could kind of mix into the pack and got on my grass line. And I was keying in on a specific grass line up there where it was a lot of milfoil, and it was very low lying milfoil. So I was looking at it on Panoptics, and I was seeing this milfoil that was about 2 feet off the bottom and 8 to 10 feet of water. And I was just throwing the 3/4 ounce jackhammer and winding it around, and caught a couple keepers doing that, got my limit. And then all of a sudden this big thunderstorm came rolling in. And if, anyone that fishes knows that when there's a pre-front situation, when you got that low pressure pushing in, it's just a moving bait opportunity. So I was feeling confident at that point, like there was going to be a bite window, and I'm actually trolling fast up to my next patch of grass, and I fire a chatterbait out there, and I got 5 bites on one cast with a chatterbait.
Wow.
So, I mean, they're just like pounding the bait, and I'm swinging and missing, and they're pounding it. And I finally swing and I catch a 3.5 pounder. And I throw like 2 more casts out there and catch an 8-2, which ended up being big fish of the tournament. I mean, just a monster bass, just like the thickest fish, like across its back. I mean, it was probably 6 inches across the back, 10 inches tall, just bloated, fat looking. I mean, just beautiful bass.
That's the fish that won it for you, right?
Yeah, in a lot of ways. Yeah. I mean, if I didn't have that one, I wouldn't have won it. There's no way. And, I would have had about 16 pounds without it. And then I never had a big bite on day 2. But, I would have had a good solid finish. I would have still been up there and got a check, but I would have never won it without that fish. And that was just one of those windows. I mean, there was literally like thunder rumbling and lightning cracking in the distance. It wasn't super close to us, but it was raining, and I had my hood up, and it was just like, I got in the zone, and I caught like 10 fish in a row on that same cast on that one shell bar.
Wow.
And so it was kind of nuts, but I had like 21 pounds that first day, and I never got another bite in that area on that stretch in that shell bar the whole rest of the tournament. I tried it on day 2 for about 20 minutes and tried it for about 10 minutes on day 3 and never got a bite there. So
wow.
I just kind of wrote it off. And, day 2 was a much different day, and everyone caught them on, not everyone, but most of the field caught them on day 1 really good, because it was just a feeding day. When you got low pressure and some current ripping and current, and rain falling, it's just, they're going to eat on Pickwick, especially that time of year. So it was kind of a perfect scenario, and I was able to capitalize on that with that, big blessing of a bite, which was just awesome. But day 2 was totally different. I pulled up on that same little gravel point in Bear Creek, caught one keeper that wasn't even 2 pounds, rolled on up the lake to the grass, and I was fishing. The cool thing was that stretch that it had 5 or 10 boats on it on day 1. Those boats left and went to the backside of Kroger Island. And the reason they left is because a couple of the guys that were in the top 3 that they saw catch them were back there, I believe. And so the boats kind of flocked to the backside of the island.
That rod pattern.
Yeah, exactly. I know. And I hate to say that. Like, I don't know that that's what happened, but I got that feeling when I pulled up there. I'm like, because I was,
you can tell when there's a bent rod pattern going on. All the boats.
Yeah,
are
I was boat
5
on day 1, and I'm boat 221 on day 2. And so on day 2, I'm boat 221, and I roll up there, and there's like one other boat on the stretch of grass I was really liked early in the morning. And I'm like, wow, there's no one here. That's kind of weird. And there was one other guy named Jacopo Gilelli, and he's a super nice guy. And we were talking and we're firing. We fired towards each other, and our cast landed just apart from, about 20 feet apart from each other as we're talking and just having a good time, just relaxed fishing. And I'm winding, and he sets the hook, and I set the hook, and his was like a 2.5 pounder, and mine was like a 4.5. And I'm like, are you kidding me right now? Like, what is going on? Mine's just jumping full body out of the water. And I landed perfectly. It was hooked good and on that jackhammer, and went a little bit farther. And I started slowing down at that point. And I saw an isolated clump of grass that got a little taller, and I slow rolled the jackhammer over it on Panoptics and got smoked and caught a 360 something largemouth, and then trolled over to my stumpy area. And I fired a chatterbait at a stump, and I'm literally watching it on Panoptics and I pump it by the stump, and I see one shoot up off the stump at it, and I burned it. I started speeding it, and it just whoom, and it came up behind it when I sped it up and smoked it. And that was like a 3.25. And then I see another stump, and I fire a Carolina rig out there at the stump, with a short leader on it, which I've been doing to catch fish in practice, and land it right on top of the stump, and it goes dunk, and catch another one over 3. And so I'm like, holy cow. Like, I just got 17 plus pounds, and I'm, guaranteed to be in the top 10 by 8:30, 9 o'clock. I'm like, what in the world? So it was all kind of coming together at that point, but I still never thought about winning. So what I did, if anyone's ever in the situation where they're, where you've made the cut, my game plan after that was to eliminate water and to go practice a little bit. So I didn't want any other notion, like any other preconceived notions or things I'd done in practice, to creep into my mind on the final day of the tournament. So I ran way up the river up to the 7 Mile Island area. And I ran a shallow largemouth spawning pattern. I ran a bluff wall smallmouth pattern where I'd been catching spawning smallmouth. And then I tried flipping some cut mouths where the fish were kind of drawn out of the cut mouths into a little bit deeper water on laydowns. And I ended up catching like a 3 1/4 that culled out a 280, flipping laydowns. And so that, it culled like another half a pound up, and just kind of got it in my mind though, that I wasn't going to worry about that on the final day. I was going to just really hunker down in the grass and on the stumps and just go from there. So that's kind of how day 1 and 2 went. And then day 3, I caught him doing something completely different that I didn't even have in my boat on days 1 and 2. And I had rigged it up that night. I literally didn't have him in my boat. And on the, the night between day 2, the night before the final day of the tournament, I was packing up the boat and the truck because we had to leave that morning. My family had to go with me. We had to leave the house. We were staying out in Florence, and rigged up a big worm on a shaky head, the Meg Fatties, and by Z-Man, and rigged it up on a shaky head. And I told my wife, I was like, I'm going to catch him on this. I was like, I've seen lampreys on my fish. I was like, this thing's going to catch him. So I pull up there I didn't get a bite on the first point I fished in Bear Creek, but I stopped at the boat ramp on the way out, and I threw a jerkbait at the boat ramp and caught 4 keepers. And then I headed on up the lake. I had like 4 fish for 8 pounds. They weren't big ones, but I had a couple 2-pounders, and rolled on up and never got a bite on a chatterbait for over an hour, maybe 2 hours. And I was like, all right, I got to try this stump pattern. So I pull up to the first set of stumps and throw the shaky head out there, land it right on the stump and get bit. And it was like a 4+. And I go like 2 stumps over. I pitch this stump, pitch to the next stump with that big worm, and lose like a 5-pounder. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And so I go to the next stump, and Andy Crawford, the Bassmaster photographer, got there, and I caught a 3, then I caught a 6, then I caught a 270, and, caught one other nice one. And that was all she wrote. Right there, I had the 18 pounds, and it was just those little adjustments and just being able to fish free. And it was obviously just meant to be. I mean, it was my week to win. And thank goodness. I mean, it was just an amazing opportunity.
Well, yeah, great adjustments. Great adjustments. Well,
yeah.
So now you find yourself sitting in first at in the Central Open Series. If the next 2 events go well, are you a candidate to fish the elites? I mean, is that something you would do?
Absolutely, man. I've always wanted to fish the elites, and it's been, a goal of mine in a lot of ways. But at the same time, I'm so content with my life and what I do that I don't need the elites to be happy. I've said it before, I love fishing the Bassmaster Opens, and I get that top level competition aspect through that. But I'm so content and grateful with where I'm at that if I make the Elite Series, it's going to be for a reason. And I'm not worried about making it at all. I just want to keep on fishing and having fun.
Koppel Outfitters specializes in adventure gear. Anything you need for getting outside, Koppel Outfitters has it and more. Go have an adventure now. I wanted to ask you about your guide service. You talk about being a teaching guide. What is a teaching guide?
Yeah, so most of the people that go fishing with me, I mean, I do get some trips where someone just wants to go catch fish and have fun, and that's awesome. I love taking people like that. But a lot of people want to learn. They want to learn detailed stuff. Fishing changes week by week and day by day. And so like I might travel for 2 weeks and I get home and I've got 3 guide trips in a row. And so you think about when you go on a guide trip with me, when I haven't been on a lake I know really well, you get to see me break it down. And I break these lakes down on the Coosa River really fast. Just because I can go check a creek and I can run 3 or 4 flat points or 2 flat points. And if I get bit on them, I've got 20 others that we can go get bit on in most cases, and until the lighting changes and the conditions change. But then I can run out to the river and check my shallow current fish. And I can, I've got these, so much knowledge. And so what I like doing is teaching with every single guide trip I teach. And when you're teaching, you don't get the pressure and the stress of like, oh my gosh, I have to put these people on fish. Because that just kind of comes with rolling through the progressions of a day and running all these different patterns and fishing, all these different ways to catch them. Because there's always fish biting something somewhere on a lake. It doesn't matter what day it is. You've seen it in tournaments. Someone always catches them. It doesn't matter where you're at in the country. There's very few situations, unless the lake's frozen, where people don't catch fish, Yeah. So I've just learned to adapt, and I love teaching. I used to think I wanted to be a teacher when I was growing up if I didn't fish. And come to find out, I get to be a fisherman and a teacher, which is pretty cool. So
there you go.
It's awesome, man. So I really love guiding. I've got a passion for it.
People book you through your website?
Yeah, I get a lot of bookings through my Joey Fishing website. It's just joeyfishing.com.
Yeah.
And then a lot of people look me up on social media on my Joey Fishing Instagram and Joey Fishing Facebook. And that way you're able to follow along with my family and my kids. And we have a lot of fun together. I just posted a new YouTube video where we were out on Logan Martin, and I wasn't even going to bring a camera. I had actually had a guide trip that morning, and my son brought my GoPro out, and it only had 30 minutes left on the card. And so he was like, we're filming. I'm like, Zeke, we don't have to film today, buddy. Let's just go fishing. And Zeke was like, no, we got to film this. So we pulled up to our first current break, and we probably caught 10 fish before the camera stopped rolling. We probably caught 25 there all in all, but we got it all on camera and just had a blast as a family. So it was pretty funny. And little Eli, my 5-year-old son, actually beat his big brother. So that was his first time whooping him in official bass fishing. So it was pretty cool.
Hey, real quick, talk about Sweetwater TV. I know that you work with Miles Berghoff on that. Is that something that's still going on? Is that a project that's going to continue? What is that all about?
Yeah, so we've been doing that now for 7 years, and our this season is all in the books. And the best way to watch is on waypointtv.com. That's the best way to see all the episodes, but it's also on the Sportsman channel if you set your DVR for that, or get ready to watch it when it's on live, which not many people do anymore. But Sweetwater's been an amazing thing, and that's just come from, that opportunity came from just making friends in the industry. And I became good friends with a guy named Tom Rowland, who hosts Saltwater Experience through working for Bass Pro Shops in Nitro back in the day and the Spring Fishing Classics. And that all came together. And Miles and I already knew each other. And they were like, hey, do you guys want to be co-hosts of the show together? And I was like, heck yeah, man. Me and Miles are already buddies. And so but it's been really cool. The best thing about Sweetwater is how much our families have grown together. And Miles and I are, we're very, very good friends, as close to friends as you can be without growing up with somebody. I mean, he's one of my best friends, and I love him like a brother. And my wife and his wife are just best friends. They get along so good. Awesome. And he loves my kids just like I do. I mean, it's a cool relationship. And you can see that on the water when you're watching Sweetwater. We have a great time together, and we get to just go out and fish these different lakes. And sometimes we compete against each other, which is kind of funny too. So we actually have a competition show from this year and last year. We were head to head against each other, which is pretty funny. And you guys will have to watch to see who won. So, but yeah. So I mean, we just have a blast together. It really is a cool thing. So yeah, Sweetwater's still alive and strong, and we're still rolling with it and having a good time. And yeah, like I said, you can watch it on waypointtv.com.
Excellent. So what's next for Joey Nania? What's like the next couple of weeks look like?
So I've got I'm supposed to have a guide trip tomorrow, but it's supposed to be storming tomorrow in the great state of Alabama. So we're going to take the day off and organize my fishing room, which you can't fully see it right now, but it's kind of a mess. You can see the fish tank back there. I need to drain that since we don't have a pet fish right now. But yeah, so I'm going to get things done around the house tomorrow. But I've got a Sylacauga Marine tournament. We're actually leading Angler of the Year in the Sylacauga Marine Trail, which is like a statewide trail here in Alabama. And hopefully we can go catch them at Lay Lake this coming weekend. And then I've got a little fun tournament at Gunnersville coming up, and then just a bunch of guide trips. I've got like 18 guide trips in the next 25 days or so. So I guide about 200 days a year.
Thanks for being with us tonight. It's good to meet, it's good to meet the up and coming stars. And I do feel that there's something really special about what you're doing, and best of luck to you. And we'll talk to you again soon.
All right, Keith, I appreciate it, man. Have a great night.
All right. Good night.
See ya.